Well, I don't know if John Klickner had a little insight this morning that I was going to need something, but he gave me 2 pieces of bread in my cup. So maybe I was going to be a little long-winded, and so I need a little extra bread to keep me going. That's neat, though. You never know what's going to happen. But you do know that things are going to happen that you don't always expect. We had game night last night, and I knew this was going to happen, but I really didn't think it would happen. But we had some in our crowd who tried to change the rules on me. Yes. Hello, Bob. That's always the story, right? And so when we live life, we think life's not fair. It's not fair. Now, I've been going through a little situation in my own personal life. I'd like to share a little bit with you about the message that I'm preaching this morning. I'm calling this the journey of faith. And I am sort of embarking on a journey of faith. I got a knock on my door last Monday. 2 men from Lsbc company came to visit with me and told me that my property was in their right-of-way. Not only was my property in their right-of-way, but all the buildings on my house and property were in their right-of-way. My house, the building behind my house, the metal shed behind that, all in the path of the right-of-way. I said, okay, what does that mean? He says, well, we're going to be putting a new pipeline in. We're going to have to tear it down. Well, that was a shocker. I've been there 25 years. I didn't know the right-of-way was there. I knew a gas line was there, but I didn't know that they had a 75-foot right-of-way on my property. 50 of it's on my property, 25 of it's on my neighbor's property. And they had a nice little map, and they got it out and showed me, and yeah, there's stakes in my yard, and right in the middle of my house, that's where that stake is going. Now they tell me the dirt is going to be moved out of the pipeline onto my neighbor's yard. But the machinery that they have to use to dig the pipe and lay the pipe has to be on my side of the yard. And there's not enough room for it to maneuver on my side of the yard. So they have to take down the obstacles in their way for them to be able to do the work that they are going to do. I don't have a clue where I am going to go. I've got Clyde on the job. I talked to him last night and engaged him to start looking. I'm going to have to move somewhere. I don't know when I'm going to have to move that somewhere. What they tell me is they're looking at a window of March to November. Yeah. They have already gone so far as to mark all the trees that are going to have to be cleared out. And when you look at it, every tree on my property is going to be cut down. And their plan is to build the pipeline and have that a vacant lot. So for safety reasons and other concerns that they have, that's what they want to do. So I'm resolved to thinking that, yes, I'm going to be moving unless God wants to do some kind of miracle here. But just tracking it, it looks like that's what's going to happen. I'm going to be moving. So I would consider that this is a journey of faith that I am on. And so I'm trying to gain some comfort and some direction from Abraham as he dealt with his journey of faith. So let's see what he did with the working of faith in his life. It says by faith, this is Hebrews chapter 11, starting in verse 6. By faith, Abraham obeyed when he was called to go out to the place which he would receive as an inheritance. And he went out not knowing where he was going. Now, I can identify with that. I mean, I could go north, south, east, or west. I could turn a circle and say this could be any possible direction that I'm going to go. The things I'm trying to factor in here is I don't want to leave Lakeshore. So I'm trusting that God's going to make it so that I can stay in this area. But what if God determines that He's ready for me to go? I have to factor that in. That has to be a consideration. Why is it coming up at this time, and where am I going to go, and would God want me to move? Now, in my heart, I don't have that feeling, that desire, that wish that I would have to leave, but this is a journey that I don't know where it's going to end up right now. So I have to be open, I think, to all the possibilities. So as I'm sharing this with you, I want you to be taking note of things that you could specifically be praying with me and for me about as I walk through this. I mean, you figure at the age that I am that one day I'm going to retire. I've always said I'm going to die right here in the pulpit, and that's still my request to God. And I've softened that a little bit, not necessarily die in the pulpit, but die while preaching this church, while pastoring this church. That would be okay, but not, fall over dead up here. I'm not looking for that kind of response from God. But Abraham is going to a place. That's the first thing. He has a place. Now, it's important that all of us have a place. I hope you have a place at Lakeshore Baptist Church. I hope you feel this is a place that you can come together and you can worship and you can have people who have the same ideas that you have and the same belief system that you have, and to be not only an encouragement to you, but also a challenge to you. These are people who will help you grow in your faith and help you mature in your faith. And so I think that's what Abraham was looking for. He was coming out of a pagan, idolatrous situation. The Mesopotamia was known for its idolatry. And Abraham evidently was caught up in that. He was part of that. That was his life. That was his focus. That's where he lived. And so all of this had an impact on him, and God wanted him to get it out. Now, I'm not saying God considers you to be pagan people and wants me out of here. That's what I'm trying to suggest at all. But I think there are ways and times in which God chooses to move us that are outside our control, and we don't know exactly why He's doing it and why these issues and situations have come up. So I've got a place. I've got two daughters. One lives in Salina. The other's building a house in Prosper. She's already built me a room into that house. I mean, I can go over there and look at it and say, that's my room. So it's not as though I'm going to be homeless, but I don't think I want to make the drive from Prosper or Salina all the way over here, though my son-in-law does it. He teaches at Denton Ryan, and he lives in Salina, but he's a little younger than I am. So, you got to factor those kind of things in. But I by no means don't want to give the idea that I'm looking to move away from here. I'd like to stay in this area. So that's my desire. So you can put that as number one on the prayer list. I'd like to stay in this area. Look at the second thing about Abraham, though, is that he obeyed. Look at what it says in verse 9. By faith he dwelt in the land of promise as in a foreign country, dwelling in tents, and Isaac and Jacob, the heirs with him of the same promise. For he waited for the city which has foundations, whose builder and maker is God. Now, I can quite honestly tell you, and I had this conversation with my family, that I'm looking forward to going to heaven one day. When that time comes, I want them to recognize my belief system that says that's not a bad thing. That's not a dismal experience. I think it's going to be a great experience. And I don't know when God's timing is in this, but if God is concerned and interested in what my feelings are, I'd like to stay here a little while longer. I've got a granddaughter and a grandson I'd like to at least get married before I check out. And they're pretty young. So that's sort of on my favor. Their youngness, it's going to be a while before they get to that age. So I could see myself being around for a long time. And then look at the longevity of my family on my mother's side. Her sister, her mother, her two brothers all lived in their 90s. So I'm claiming the Anderson side of the family as my heritage. Now, my grandmother, my dad's mother, she died when she was in her early 50s of cancer. My dad died when he was 57 of a heart attack. But my granddad died when he was in his 80s. So he's at least, got some of those genes there. So all of us live in this life on a temporary basis. We're not permanent here. This isn't where we're going to be forever. One day we are going to move. And we're going to be glad to know that God has prepared for us a place for us to live in. So why not enjoy this life as much as we can, but don't let this life's enjoyment keep us from not seeing the life to come. And that's what it says about Abraham. It says, he waited for the city which has foundations, whose builder and maker is God. He was living in a tent. But he was waiting for the city that has a foundation, because the city that has the foundation is the permanent city. This is a temporary city. The best foundation that we have on this planet is no more than a tent compared to the foundation that God has in the spiritual realm. You talk about something that is sure, something that is firm, something that will endure. That's God's foundation. And that's the city that God is making for us to join him and to participate with him in the explorement and the enjoyment of that city. So we look around and we think, man, this is so permanent here. But it's not. It's not. I mean, I've lived in that house 25 years. I thought it was going to be there forever. But it's not. Because, there are some machines that can come along and just boil it over. Scoop it up. Carry it off. That's the end of it. But look at the next thing. And to me, this is the key to this walk of faith. You have a vision. You have a place that you think that you're supposed to make a change, but you don't know exactly the details of that change. But you think you're supposed to make some kind of change. I pastored 4 churches in my lifetime. First Baptist Church of Garvin, Oklahoma. First Baptist Church of Roanoke, Texas. First Baptist Church of Madill, Oklahoma. And now Lakeshore Baptist Church. And at each one of those churches, I can honestly say, I was very satisfied with staying there. That would have been fine with me. But for reasons that is hard to understand exactly why, God chose to move me out of those situations and put me in this situation where he's permitted me to be here for 30 years. I was at Madill 12 years. I thought that was a long time. That's short compared to 30 years being able to be here with you people. That's amazing. And I look at that and saying, God has really blessed me by the people that he's allowed me to associate with, and how you have challenged my life and encouraged my life so much. And so I literally dwelt here, and that's what Abraham did. Notice, he dwelt in those tents. He dwelt with his heirs because he was waiting for that city. But then there comes the postponement. And this seems to be an inevitable piece of faith. Every faith that I've walked in, it seems to be like there's some kind of postponement. And maybe that's what makes it faith, is that there is a postponement, so you don't have the fulfillment of it. So you have to rock on wondering what in the world God is saying to you, and did he really say anything at all to you? If he did, why isn't it coming to fruition right now? And so look what happened to Abraham. First off, introduces his wife. By faith, verse 11, Sarah herself also received strength to conceive seed, and she bore a son when she was past the age, because she judged him faithful who had promised. Now then, Sarah had no right to expect to get pregnant. She had no right at all, except God told her she's going to. But from the human framework, she had no right at all to think that she was going to get pregnant. And she was not expecting a pregnancy. In fact, she laughed. I think I'd have cried. I mean, if you've gone through that much of life, and now you're going to have these little ones who have more energy than you ever thought about having, look what grandkids do to us. That's where she is. She is into the area past being a grandmother. She's a great grandmother by all stretch of the imagination, and yet she's going to have a little child that she is the full sole responsibility for. Abraham is probably thinking, why in the world did we ever leave Ur of the Chaldeans? Why didn't we stay there? We had family, we had friends that they could support us, they could help come in and take care of all these kids. If God was going to wait that long to give us a child, why didn't he be more specific about it when he brought us out of the land? Abraham was 75 when he came out. He was as long in the land as I've been in my house. 25 years. And he's about to finally have what he would want. I mean, come on, guys. It's not that hard on us. I keep reading these stories in the Bible about relating hardship and tragedy to labor pains. I'm glad God didn't give us the capability of birthing a child. We'd be too weak. We'd do cowardly. We wouldn't go through that. But yet, you women do. And you come back and go through it again and again. And my daughter's done it 4 times. My youngest daughter did it 3 times. And I'm sitting there thinking, I don't think the Bible lies. This has got to be terrible. It's got to be rough. At the moment you're going through it, you got to say, what in the world am I doing here? But God does a supernatural thing after you give birth. You look at that little child and I'd go through it again. Go through it again. It just gives us a little bit, I think, of the pain that Christ went through on the cross. Why would he go through that much pain and sorrow for you and I? Because of his love. Because of his love for us. And so here's Abraham in this predicament that he's moved from Ur the Chaldeans to the land of Canaan. But yet, he's living in tents. That's not what he's living in Ur the Chaldeans. He probably had, we don't know what he had, but I can just imagine he probably had some kind of spatial housing. Something that was substantial, something that was nice. And moving to a tent. But notice it says, this deal with Sarah. She received strength to conceive seed. She had to be supernaturally empowered by God to go through this. And then it says, therefore from one man, and him as good as dead, were born as many as the stars of the sky in the multitude, innumerable as the sand which is by the seashore. From this one child, when he is 100 years old, he's going to have a descendancy that goes beyond your imagination. As the sands of the sea, as the stars of the sky. That's how many descendants Abraham is going to have. These all died in faith, not having received the promises, but having seen them afar off, were assured of them, embraced them, and confessed that they were strangers and pilgrims on the earth. For those who say such things declare plainly that they seek a homeland. And truly, if they had called to mind that country from which they had come out, they would have had opportunity to return. But now they desire a better, that is, a heavenly country. Therefore, God is not ashamed to be called their God, for he has prepared a city for them. What has happened is God had put into the heart and the mind of Abraham this desire for something that Abraham didn't know that was there, but by faith he had the belief that it was there, this city. Somehow God communicated to him. We don't know. God may have had a one-on-one conversation with Abraham. We don't know how he did this. But we do know that Abraham became convinced, God has a city for me to live in. And therefore, I'm going to be trucking towards that city. That's where I'm heading. Now that however long it takes God to get me there, you see, Abraham, we see when he has the experience with Isaac, he didn't have any lack of confidence in God being able to do the impossible. If God wanted him to kill Isaac, so be it. But he'd resuscitate him. He'd bring him back to life. That's who this God was. That's the picture that Abraham had of God. Now, can you imagine being in that kind of environment and coming out with that kind of solid picture of God? I mean, just think about how your life and my life is influenced by the environment we're in. People saying so many negative things and so many distrustful things and so many critical things about God and about being a Christian and having faith and trust in Him, and how that tears at the fabric of your faith. It tears at the fabric of your life. And you begin to question, thoughts flip through your mind. Goodness, is this really what if I got it all messed up, all confused? And Abraham worked through all of that. He looked at the people around him. They all died. They didn't achieve that city as far as he knew. But he knew that this was a promise that God had made to him, that he would be as numerous as the seashore and as numerous as the stars. And he would be going to a city that had a sure foundation made by God himself. I mean, once you and I, who are frail and physical, encounter a supernatural God, that's got to transform your life and your thinking to see the possibilities that are there for Him. Just think back in your life of the many amazing things that God has done in your life that at the time you thought, there's no way that's going to happen. There's no way that can come about. And then God does something and he doesn't even bother to tell you what He's doing and how He's doing it. But He does it. So this is where Abraham, he's in this postponement. I don't feel like I'm in the postponement because I don't know the place I'm going to yet. I've got to be in the direction of the place before the postponement can come, I think. But we'll see about that. But then Abraham was asked to give a proof. To give proof. Do you really believe in God, Abraham? Do you really believe that He brought you thousands of miles out of the Ur Chaldeans over to the land of Canaan. Do you really believe that it was God who put you in these tents, but he's going to give you a more solid foundation, a better city? So let's test Abraham's faith. So what does God ask him to do? By faith, Abraham, when he was tested, offered up Isaac. And he who had received the promises offered up his only begotten son, of whom it was said, in Isaac your seed shall be called. Now notice, Isaac sort of tried to do a deal with God. He says, couldn't it be Eliezer, my servant? I mean, he's already here on the ground. I'm an old man. Sarah's an old woman. We're not apt to have children. So couldn't it be him? And then Sarah got all scared about it and said, wow, I can't have children. Let me get a younger woman for Abraham. And therefore she got her handmaid and said, you go in and you get Hagar pregnant, and the child that comes from her will be our child, our descendant. You see the two ways that they're trying to circumvent the fact that God is able to do what he claims he's able to do. And so they both go through those. They actually have a son, Ishmael. But it's no Isaac. Because God said, no, you don't get the picture. Your son, your own son, that comes from this woman, Sarah, that's going to be your descendant. That's the one that I've chosen. So they got to wait around. Because God's rejected Eliezer, he's rejected Ishmael. He says it's going to be Isaac, though, the son from this woman who is your wife. And sure enough, Isaac was born. I can imagine that Abraham begins to see, this God that I am serving is much bigger than I am. He's greater than I am. He knows more things than I do. And so they had Isaac. And so now that I've got Isaac, you want me to do what? Take him up on the mountain and sacrifice him? Well, it just makes sense, God, if I put Isaac to death, that's going to stop the line of descendancy. There isn't going to be any stars in the heaven or any sand on the seashore that will number my descendants. It's all smoke. But Abraham continued to trust God. He took him up on the mountain, but God told him he'd provide the sacrifice. There was a lamb caught in the bush, and Abraham took it and used it as a sacrifice. But notice the final three verses. The perpetuation. It just comes across as dry writing. But this is really powerful writing when you think about it. When you think about where Abraham and Sarah were at their age, and no children. Then notice what it says. By faith, Isaac blessed Jacob and then Esau concerning things to come. That's the first thing. Isaac blessed Jacob and Esau, his two descendants, which would then make three descendants from Abraham. And by faith, Jacob, when he was dying, blessed each of the sons of Joseph and worshiped leaning on the top of his staff. Now that's 12. So suddenly we got 15 descendants. I was counting my family the other day. There's 17 in my family now for my two daughters. And marriages that have taken place and the great-grandchildren that have been married. There's 17 of us now. And at one time there was two of us. So, I mean, it's not so hard for me to imagine Abraham flourishing with descendants. So Isaac blessed his sons. Joseph worshiped leaning on the top of his staff. If you look at some of the other translations, it says put his head on his bed. The interesting thing about the Hebrew language is it's a language of consonants, but no vowels. So you take three consonants and then you can put multiple vowels in between and get multiple meanings of words. And that's what has happened here. The Septuagint uses the vowels to give us the top of his staff. The Hebrew Old Testament, the Hebrew part, give us the vowels that give us on top of his bed. Now, I don't know which it is. I mean, if I was to have to choose, I'd choose, well, an old man, he's probably laying on his bed, not on his staff. But that's okay. It didn't matter. What he was doing is he was blessing each of the sons of Joseph. He was perpetuating the faith that had begun with him and transferring it to his family. And that's the whole purpose of faith. It's not just in order that you and I might get the good that we might think we can out of it, but that we can pass it on. Who is learning from you about faith? Not about what you believe, but how you live your belief. What kind of faith are you demonstrating? Are you displaying? And so this is what happened to Abraham. And then it says the third descendant, by faith, Joseph, when he was dying, made mention of the departure of the children of Israel and gave instructions concerning his boat. So you see the faith continued on in that Joseph said, one day, folks, you're going to leave this place. I want you to take my bones with you. One day you're going to move from this land. I want you to take my bones with you. So he was planting the seed of faith there in the minds of his descendants by letting them know one day God's going to move you out of here. One day God moved our great-grandfather, Abram, out of the land of Chaldeans. One day he moved us out of out of Canaan into the land of Egypt. And one day he's going to move us back to the land of Canaan. That's going to become our land. Now then, I don't expect to put my struggle of faith near like the struggle of faith that Abraham has. It's pale in comparison. But it's the best I can offer. This is where I'm going. I don't know the place. And there could be a post moment. Might not find any place. Could be a relocation. I have no idea. But I tell you now, I have no plans to do that unless God just says, Homer, that's what I want you to do. Can't you get it? And if that's what God wants me to do, he's going to pretty well dictate the course of the way things go. Hey, Homer, yeah. I may have trouble finding you a small one somewhere with a waterfall. Well, I'm sorry, Clyde. That's part of the requirements. So, you be in prayer for me as I go through this, and I trust that it is something all of us will learn from what's going to happen in the midst of it. Let's pray together. Father, we're thankful to you for this time together this morning and for each one that's here, for the impact of their life upon mine. I just pray you would bless us as a congregation of believers, that we would be faithful in doing the things that you've called us to do. and pray it in Jesus' name. Amen. Let's stand together and we'll sing our time of invitation. And you just consider what God's speaking to your heart about. If there's a decision that you made in a public way, I invite you to come forward. If you need to make it just right where you are, then you take time to do that now as we sing.